By the way, how has COVID affected your work now? With human participants, we
It's
can't test them,
Yeah.
but with animals, is it the same or?
No, not really. No, it depends on where the animals are. So, for example, now I work a lot with farm animals. So you need to go into the stables, and there are many people around. So it gets a bit more complicated again, because you need to, kind of make sure that you're not that closely together, or that you're wearing your masks and whatever, which can then affect the animals again and their behavior, because you kind of look weird, right? It hasn't affected me that much, or probably not as much as it has affected you, but still, it's not that flexible and easy anymore to just plan something. But so far, it's okay. So,
are there animals that only know the experimenters with masks? Like how children now kind of grow up seeing other people with masks all the time, like everyone outside of their family. Is there like some animals that basically now it would be weird for them if you were to talk to them without a mask? Or
that's a good question. I don't know, because it would need to be not even. I was thinking of puppies that were just born now and
something like
went into a family, but then again at home you don't wear your mask, right? So which animals are there which only are in the public and seeing people with masks? Maybe in zoos.
Yeah, well, I was thinking if you said you work in a stable and you always have to wear masks, like a calf or something that was born a year ago.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Really interesting, but there will definitely be some interesting research for the future to see how if they can still see us or read our emotions while we wear masks, because for sure dogs react differently if you wear a mask or not.
I mean, I always assume that dogs can't see that well, but it's more smell and hearing. I guess it sounds different when you talk, but...
Yeah, but so in a close range, they can see pretty well.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Definitely. But also, for example, if you go in and a dog wants to greet you and wants to lick your mouth area, they cannot access this, right? So they try to go for the ears or something. So it definitely is a bit weird.
I really like that will avoid the cloth area, basically, and lick your forehead and your ears.
Exactly, whatever they can reach.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But actually, maybe, I'll ask already about what you're doing right now. Then whilst we're kind of on the topic, roughly, so you're the research that we're mainly going to be talking about today is, your stuff with dogs and parrots. I guess you have dogs on a farm, but not really farm animals in that sense, right? So are you still doing cooperation and inequality and that kind of stuff, or inequity in farm animals, or what are you kind of doing right now?
Partly. So I'm very interested in this whole topic of social cognition, so how animals are interacting with each other, which aspects of the social environment do they understand? So really basic things like, can they recognize each other? Can they keep track of one another if they don't see each other for some time? So things like this are really interesting. I think especially now with farm animals, I always wanted to work with farm animals and to kind of improve their lives. I have this idealistic way of thinking that, we should treat them in a better way. And so with them, there's actually really little research into cognition in general, because there's so much focus on how to increase their production and to make them healthier or reproduce faster, whatever. But so little about how they interact with their environment, because they're always in these barren environments. They have no straw available or no space to walk anywhere. And so now having this background working with dogs on cooperation and also with parrots on cooperation, you have this background with this research in general. And I want to apply this also to farm animals to kind of better understand, what do they know about each other and how can we use this information to improve their housing conditions. So yes, I'm still conducting the research with farm animals, but I need to start at another level. So at a very more basic level first, and then we can proceed, hopefully.
So first basic social cognition, and then, so what farm animals are you studying? Because there's, quite a lot, right, that could fall into this.
It's true. Yeah, it kind of depends on the question. So with this, for now, at the moment, I'm running a study with pigs, because they're interesting in this regard, as they're also very gregarious. They live together with these family groups. They have a really, strong social structure in the way that they have a dominance hierarchy. And it's usually a closed group. They do not let others in. So they have kind of a good first step to understand how they are cooperating with each other or how they help each other in certain ways.
And how can pigs, like what can pigs do to help another pig? Like what is some kind of normal behavior that's, not something that maybe you would study, that you could control experimentally, but just kind of in the natural environment? Like, how do pigs help each other?
So there are many different situations. For example, if you think that a piglet is somehow in distress because it fell into a river or whatever, or is kind of stuck somewhere, that another pig comes and tries to help it get out of the situation. Or that one pig found some really interesting food somewhere and is calling the others to also come and share this food. Yeah, things like...
How specific are like the calls of a pig? Do they just say like, come here? Do they make just a loud noise and then get attention, then other pigs come? Or do they like specifically call pigs? Or do they even specifically call them because saying like, hey, there's good food here? How specific can they be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's actually not that much done in this regard. So for sure they have different calls, like for attention or signaling that they're in distress. So that this high-pitched scream that, the pig is in pain or whatever. So they have different ones, but I think there's not so much research into whether they have individual calls so that they can recognize each other. But I'm not sure.
That's crazy. That we wouldn't. I just assumed like people had already done the research to figure out, can pigs address each other specifically, or can they address specific situations or whatever. I just assumed someone had already done that.
Not that I'm aware of, but this is not really my research area into this whole vocalization aspect.
I mean, just like one thing I always think about when I think of this kind of research in animals and whether they can cooperate and that kind of stuff is that they, well, at least like from, I guess from a human perspective, it seems like they can do a lot less specific things often in terms of like, I mean, we'll talk more about your parrot study later, but they can't do that much with their beaks, right? They can hand a token over or something, but they can't like manipulate things precisely or that kind of thing because they just lack the manual dexterity but it's less than anyway, maybe not, but, or like with calling, I guess parrots can do quite a lot, but like other animals, it seems, are more limited in terms of the range of vocalizations they can even make. So I always wonder, like, to what extent, it just seems like any social interaction is based on a lot more uncertainty than there might be in humans, where you can be much more precise in your meaning or in your actions. Yeah,
I think we humans often often have problems to think of how it would be if we would be a bird or something, because we try to, kind of impose our way of living or our way of interacting onto other animals as well. So for sure, also with all of these cognitive studies, it's kind of how would we solve this paradigm, because we build it in a way. So we think of, okay, this animal needs to pull now or needs to grab this, but for the animal it might be completely different in how they perceive it. And that's kind of the difficulties in this kind of field, because we are just humans. We cannot know how it feels like to be a dog or whatever. So that's the big issue and the problem, to kind of think outside of the box.
So how do you try to do that? Is it just studying the animals as much as you can and using tasks like that, or creating tasks that require behavior that they would do anyway? Or is that all you can do? Or
yes, so for sure you should always start by observing an animal species for some time to know how they are interacting, how they're managing their time over the day. So when maybe you want to test always during lunchtime, and then they're always sleeping, so you kind of need to take this into account. But also if you design paradigms or apparatuses, you kind of need to take their natural behavior into account. Like, for example, pigs, they always like to root, to do things with their nose, to dig into the soil or whatever. So obviously you shouldn't use a task where they need to do something with their foot, because they would normally never do it.
Yeah.
They need to take this into account. But still then it might be that they're perceiving the task completely different than you intended them to do.
Yeah. There's actually one question I had when I saw the video of the Parrot study. Mm-hmm. Because I guess technically they don't have to, but in that case they transferred the tokens by, one picking it up with a beak and like this beak-to-beak transmission of the token, if that's the way you want to put it. Mm-hmm. And it didn't seem super smooth, just like mechanically the way they did it. Like, is that something do they usually transfer things via their beaks to each other, or? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so especially parrots use their beak in a really sophisticated way, so they can crack open these really tough nuts. They can hold it with their foot as well to kind of, move it around and put it in the correct position. So obviously they wouldn't pick up these metal things in the nature, or maybe they would a bit to play, but maybe not to give it directly to each other. But for sure they give food to one another, so they show this allo feeding, that they put their beak to the other beak and then they regurgitate the food. And so they're using their beak in the food context, but also in the play context.
Okay, very general question: do all bird species feed their youngs via this regurgitation? Mm-hmm. Or because I just realized, I just assumed they did, because that's what you see about European birds or something. Mm-hmm. Is that always the case, or?
As far as I know, yes. So in the first days, definitely, and then they bring the intact piece of insect or whatever, and the youngsters can feed on their own. But in the beginning, yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm still kind of slightly surprised that it seems we know so little about cattle or farm animals and that kind of stuff, like how they behave. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's like with most research, like you think, even like the stuff I'm doing, I often think like this is a obvious question that someone must have done before. Mm-hmm. And you search for like 3 days on the internet and you just can't find anything about it.
Or you find really old studies that did it maybe in the 70s, but not really well controlled form. And then you wonder why did nobody ever repeat this or try to replicate it?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I've been finding. Yeah, a lot of like old studies that kind of did something, but not very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I always find it like there's almost like a kind of collector's joy when you find like a paper from the 50s with 12 citations or something that kind of does what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know, you feel like a bit special for having found this paper. But then you often also realize why no one cited it. Yeah, mm-hmm. it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, but coming back to the farm animals, I think it's not that no research has been done on farm animal behavior. So there's definitely quite a lot, but often it's more going into the welfare direction, so that you kind of look at how, for example, cattle are kept. Maybe one problem, or especially with dairy cows, it's that you take out the young after several hours after they're born. You take out the calves because you want to get the milk from the mothers. So obviously the calves cannot drink from the cows anymore. Yeah. So this research is then more focused on how we can make this separation less stressful, for example, or how to get the calves more healthy in a shorter amount of time. But obviously for increasing this welfare in this regard, you need to understand maybe how they form their bond, the mother-offspring bond. How quickly is it formed? Is it reliant on vocalization between the calf and the cow, or which other aspects are involved there? So it's just kind of taking a different direction a bit.
Okay. So you said, you're interested in, these like improving their lives in these kind of farm situations. What kind of living situation do you test them in? Because I imagine that a lot of the way they're held in, meat or dairy production, I wonder whether you'd be allowed to keep them like that. Like, in a way, like you're testing them in one environment, but the actual environment that many of them live in is very different anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, like I'm assuming like you probably have fairly strict, well, first, do you test animals that live actually on a farm or like naturally, and you kind of test them that already exist in that environment? Or do you have like a lab where you have a farm that you built up to test
So we actually use both versions here. So we have one research farm in which there is just like a small amount of animals, so not a really big production farm. But for example, there in the pig stable of the university, you have like 60 pigs, and they're kept under the standard farm conditions that you can find there. Now, if you wanted to test, for example, pigs now on a farm with this really nice ecological conditions, so the most taken care of with the best welfare possible, you need to collaborate with a farmer around and do your research there. So it always depends on the conditions or what you want to test. And with this research farm, you can adapt the housing to a certain degree. So you can tell them, for example, do not mix the pigs now, but wait maybe 2 weeks, or you give them some straw now, and we observe what they're doing. But it's limited in terms of space, for example, or in terms of housing condition. They do not have outdoor access, so it's kind of always dependent on your research question. But at least with farm animals, you always, you have them all around you. You just need to have people with whom you can collaborate or who allow you to test their animals. It's a bit different if you want to test like parrots, for example, which are just not all around you and which you cannot access that easily.
Actually, in Heidelberg, where I'm right now, we have these like small green ones that fly around everywhere and make huge amounts of noise. I'm glad I don't live next to like a flock.
In the city?
Yeah.
Do
you know which ones I mean? There's these, they actually live all over. Oh, I don't, wait, let me just actually, we have the internet. No, I mean, it's the kind that exists. I also saw them in London when I lived there. They're like kind of all over Europe. The German is Halsbandsittich, but the English
isn't it like Alexandrian?
Rose-ringed parakeet. Yeah, the rose-ringed parakeet, small green ones with a red beak.
They're in Heidelberg. I didn't know.
Yeah, they are. I haven't seen them everywhere, but there's. Heidelberg isn't huge, and basically you walk like 20 minutes in any direction. Heidelberg, you're basically in the countryside, and I think like kind of on these slightly more outskirts of the city, you see. I've seen quite a lot. But yeah, I mean, you are correct, of course, in general. I didn't want to disagree with your statement that there aren't parrots. There are parrots. Yeah. It's this weird. It's so funny because apparently they exist in like Senegal and like.
They're super flexible and can live everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the first time I saw one in London, I was really concerned. I thought, like, especially it was like in November or October or December or something, and it was around 0 degrees. And I thought, oh no, like someone's parrot escaped.
Yeah.
And is, going to freeze to death now. But then I found out, like, no, they live in Europe now.
That's great. I once talked to a journalist from the Netherlands, and she was writing a story about, I think, also these same parakeets. And I thought, like, I haven't seen them anywhere in Germany yet, but it's interesting.
Oh, okay. Wait, let's see if I can find anything about where they are in.
Maybe they're even in Gießen.
Maybe you have an entire flock or whatever it's called.
But I haven't seen them yet.
So the interesting thing, actually, when you go to the German Wikipedia article for Halsbandsittich, one of the photos is of one in Heidelberg.
Okay.
So maybe they are. Wait, let's see. So in 1969, there were some in Cologne. So some along the Rhine. So Düsseldorf, Wiesbaden, Worms. I just didn't know that was big enough to mention. Mannheim, Heidelberg. Some in Frankfurt. BA seems to be like roughly between Düsseldorf and Heidelberg, that kind of
interesting
area. So yeah, but no, it's funny. Like when we talk about like social interactions and animals, those have to be the loudest birds I've ever heard. Like there'll just be like 50 of them, and they're just talking to each other the entire time.
Yeah, but at least they make nice calls. So when I worked with the parrots there in Spain, we had some macaws. And when they scream, it's like, it's not pleasant or anything. It's just loud and really annoying. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I think here it's just so many of them that it does become there was this one place in particular I used to walk by, and there was this big tree where there were at least 50 or 100 of them or something. And there were also houses right opposite the tree. And I was so glad I didn't live there, because it's just this constant noise from these birds all day. Yeah. But
yeah, and all the nice little German native birds that just like, my God.
Yeah, just shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's where I live right now. There's this bird in our garden or something that it's really interesting how that one, like the phrases it sings. Unfortunately, I have no idea what it is, but the phrases it sings sound very much like music. Like they're they have the kind of duration and the kind of melodic flow of stuff that humans also compose. Yeah. I wish I knew what it was. And it also often sounds almost like it has like the same rhythm as people talking almost. It's yeah, I wish I knew what it was. No idea.
But there's actually a lot of research going into this, into how bird songs are similar to human speech.
Really?
Yeah. And I think, for example, budgies, so these pet parrots that you keep at home, the budgies.
How do you spell that? I just want to look up which they are.
In German, it's Wellensittich.
Oh, Wellensittich. Okay, yeah, I know what that one is.
They do have some components of how they arrange their songs, which might be similar to human speech. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, is that maybe why also humans keep them? Because it's vaguely...
Maybe, yeah.
Well, it's like when I hear this one bird, it's much more interesting to listen to than like a bird that has like a random, like to me, some sort of random chirp or something.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense, right?
It's much more interesting to listen to, yeah.
Because we're so prone to our own, or to listening to other human speech and how the melody should go in a way that we prefer to be around animals that, produce similar vocalizations. But I think especially with parrots, it's also one way why humans like to keep them is that they imitate human speech. I mean, you have all those parrots that can actually say words, human words.
Can they actually do that really well? I've always heard that, but I've never actually, like, it's, like one of those facts you learn when you're about 3 years old. And a lot of those facts later on you realize are not true. But that is true.
That's true, yeah, definitely. Okay, yeah. They're really, really good at it. But unfortunately, especially those that you keep alone at home, so without other birds around. So for example, like African greys, you often keep them alone, or you used to keep them alone at home. And so if they have no social partner to interact with or to talk to, they start imitating the human voice.
Oh, it's okay. It's in particular if that's all they have as other voice.
Yeah. They're more prone to it. I mean, also birds living together in pairs or whatever, they also start doing that, or some are more prone in starting to imitating this. But I think especially birds that are kept alone it's like one way to communicate with a human.
That's all they have. Yeah.
So it's actually pretty sad.
Are you still allowed to keep birds on their own? I heard once that, like, what is it, guinea pigs or something? In some countries, you're not allowed to have only one. Is that the case with like these larger parrots, or?
It's a good question. I don't know. It should be like that, but then again, with the birds, you have the problem they get so old and they're not especially. So some are really difficult to introduce to new birds. So, for example, if you keep like an African grey, which is 60 years old or so, maybe his or her mate already died, and so it's difficult to introduce them to a new bird. So I think it's a bit more tricky than, for example, with guinea pigs that you say like they always have to be in pairs.
But they just get used to each other in their youth or whatever, or?
Yeah, or when they are getting adults and they start to mate or to form pairs, or many parrots have these lifelong monogamous pairs. So they're really, in a couple for all of their life.
And if one dies, they don't want to remarry.
Yeah, that's some don't. Yeah.
That's very romantic.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start imitating people.
Mm-hmm. There was actually a really funny news story some month ago from a zoo in England somewhere. They had like 3 or 4 African greys, and they started to imitate so many swearing words. They needed to take them out of the zoo because it was not... Yeah, well, some people complained about the swearing African greys.
But that's probably intentional by... I can very much imagine people going by saying, hey, let's teach the parrots some swear words. And then I guess especially if you're in England, there are a few ones you would use more than others. So those are probably the ones that they just... Yeah.
It's funny.
Humans always find a way to make the lives of animals difficult, even by teaching the swear words.
Yeah.
That then get the birds taken out of. But what do they do with them? Just like take them, put them somewhere where children can't listen to them, or
maybe, or just split up this group that this weird dynamic kind of got out. But then again, like all the individuals, they know how to say those words. So
exactly.
But maybe you don't have this one individual in there that triggered this. The swear word.
Yeah, maybe there was just one parrot who was really annoying, and the others just told him to fuck off or whatever. They told him.
Maybe.
I have actually, I want to talk about the papers now, but before I have like one last question about farm animals, which is just purely random and from my own life. So I grew up more or less in the countryside, and we'd have fields with cows and that kind of stuff. So, if you'd walk by a field fairly close, I mean, they were like, fenced off, of course, so the cows don't, run away. But there would, often if you'd stand there for a minute or something, not even a minute, like if you just stand there for, like you'd have a pretty big field and the cows would be 100 meters away or something. If you stand there for a minute or so, the cows will come. And, we also had a dog, so we'd walk the dog around there. The dog would stay at a place, sniff, and then all the cows would come, and the dogs and the cows would look at each other and be vaguely excited, but not exactly know what to do. But what are the cows exactly? What are they doing? Why are they coming to you if you just kind of stand there for a minute? Like, are they expecting? I always wondered, like, do they expect me to do something, or they're just curious, or?
So I think one thing is for sure that they're curious about what's happening there. The other thing might be that they have this kind of reinforcement history with humans. So whenever they see a human, something interesting is happening, or hopefully good, like they're being milked or they're getting food or something good
these
happens.
Cows grew up pretty idyllically, I think. They probably something good happened,
Yeah, so maybe they were just coming close to with the hope that something good will happen.
Okay.
But with the dog, it's really interesting because actually they're kind of, you could see them as a predator for the cows. So
that's an optimistic dog, though. To get a cow, like that's.
Yeah, well, but still, I mean, they can chase them, and cows are flight animals, so for sure they should keep out or be wary of predators. But I often see that as well, that cows are really interested in dogs. So I've often seen it that they're even more interested in the dogs than they are in the humans. So when I walk past the field, that the cows are just interested in my dogs, but they're not even looking at me. So it's weird that they have this fascination with dogs. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, we always had this thing where so in this case there would be like, I don't know, maybe 10 cows or so in a field, and maybe it's more, I don't know, but let's say it's 10, 15 something, and then they'd usually all come and they kind of just stand near the fence, and then the dog would stand on the other side of the fence, and they could see each other, and like they'd just look at each other for a minute or so, and then at some point they'd realize, okay, nothing's really happening here, so they'd slightly start diffusing again. But they were always, I mean, in this case the dog was also closest to the fence, so maybe the dog was just closer than me. But they always seemed very interested in like what was going on. Even though nothing was going on, so I don't know.
Yeah, but then again, if you think of the habitat that those cows are living in, they're on this meadow. I mean, they have lots of grass to eat from, but apart from that, there's not much happening, right? So whenever somebody comes by or drives by, it's interesting. Yeah,
this is literally just a pretty big field. The cows are standing it, they're grazing. But do cows do other stuff? Like, I don't know, I guess we don't have wild cows anymore in Germany, whatever, but... Yeah. Unless they're like, they escape, then they're very wild. But, do cows really do that much more than just graze all day?
Sure.
What do they do?
Sure. I mean, they rest and ruminate, which is also, again, like
that's a great
food
activity.
related. But they also exchange social interaction so that they rest together, and body contact, that they groom each other. So they lick each other's faces or the side. So they also have friends. They prefer some cows more than others. They walk towards other food areas. So they walk towards sleeping places or get into shelter when it's raining.
But they could do most of that on a field, right? I guess they don't have like new environments that they can explore in a way, but everything else.
But still, it's always the same area, right? In most fields or meadows are kind of even, so there's not even like a hill to climb or to walk down.
Yeah, here they're even. Yeah.
So it's a bit boring, you could say.
But actually, are there still cows that kind of roam the wild freely in Europe? I don't know. It seems to me they're all kind of...
Yeah, so the wild ancestor of our cows today, the aurochs, I think it's in English, aurochse. This one went extinct, but I think they tried to combine really primitive breeds with each other again so that they build up like a fake species like that. And I think they're still somewhere kept in wildlife parks and in bigger areas. I think in Poland somewhere they also have a bigger group of these animals, and they live there freely on their own and are not in close human contact.
Okay, and then but I'm assuming like most wild animals, as far as I understand, they usually have like their area where they live, right? They're not completely nomadic.
Yeah.
Is it much? Do you know if it's much bigger than, like, how big is the normal? I don't know what the word would be. The
home
normal
range.
Yeah, home range of a wild cow. Do you know what it is?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
No, but I would expect it to be big, because if you think like they're really big animals, they need to consume lots of grass in order to keep their metabolism running. So they need to inhabit a really big area in order to provide enough food for them.
Yeah, cow. Oh, good old cow. I really like cows, but it's just, they're such like sweet creatures, but they just stand around all day.
Yeah. But there's so much more to them if you look a little bit longer and see what they do and play as well.
I've never really seen cows lick another cow. I mean, like, maybe I just didn't stand, or maybe they don't do that when humans are around, like, like strangers or something, I could imagine, maybe.
I don't know, but they do that quite often, so it's not super rare.
Yeah, I mean, like, as I grew up kind of, it's like, I grew up seeing these animals, but never like up close in that sense. In the sense that, if I'd walk the dog, I'd go past one or two fields that might have cows, but, I wouldn't go into the field or anything. Yeah, sometimes they run around a bit. I've seen that. Cows are probably the least elegant running species I know of. They have this very angular kind of
But then again, like, why do they run like that? Because we selectively bred them to be in this shape so that they can produce lots of muscle mass and have this really big missing the English word.
What's the
memory gland, like the oiter.
Udder.
Udder, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So there's this really big udder like shaking there under their belly. So they cannot run that super elegantly. They're not bred to run.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
if you think of the really intensive farming conditions, they cannot run at all. They can walk, but that's it.
Yeah.
Don't have sufficient space. So it's a bit mean to say they cannot run properly, because
I'm sorry.
We made them like that, right?
I'm very sorry for insulting Cal's gait.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I said I still like them. They're very cute. Yeah, I think actually me growing up like that is, I have such a wrong idea of what farming conditions are like, because I grew up with like sheep and cows on, these often pretty large fields also, just like doing their thing. But so whenever I think of like beef, I think of that rather than how, where it actually comes from.
Yeah, I think that's often a common misconception. And I think also all those producers with their pictures on the trucks or whatever of these really happy cows outside, they're really trying to feed this misconception and the myth of happy animals outside, which is unfortunately often not the case. Yeah,
the only happy cows are the purple milker cows.
Yes, of course.
I think that's the only one that's true.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay. Shall we talk about your research now?
Yes.
Yes, as I mentioned, I'd like to start with your papers on inequity aversion in dogs, which you did a few years ago, 5 years ago? That's when it was published. Can you maybe briefly summarize the +1 paper, the inequity aversion negatively affects tolerance and contact-seeking behaviors towards partner and experimenter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this was the first study that I did during my PhD at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna.
Sorry, can I just, for listeners who don't know, I put the references in the description, so you can just look there for any of the papers we're mentioning. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so this was the first paper of my PhD in Vienna, and the topic of the PhD was, broadly speaking, to understand why dogs show inequity aversion. So why do they react if they get something different than their partner? So both do the same work, but one gets a better payoff than the other one. And so we wanted to find out, why is this the case? Are they really actually understanding that the partner gets something better, or is it like really simple frustration mechanism that they get frustrated because they do not get anything? And so I tried to replicate with this study a previous study from my supervisor back then, who was the first to find out that dogs react to unequal treatment. And so we used the same paradigm that she used. So we had two dogs sitting next to each other. They were alternately asked to give their paw, and either they got the same reward for giving the paw, or they got a different reward. So that one partner got a piece of sausage, the other one got nothing for giving the paw. And so in order to find out if they're just frustrated because the partner gets something better, we incorporated some control conditions. So, for example, they were tested also alone without a partner present, and they likewise did not get a reward, so they could not compare it to their partner's reward. And so following all of these test conditions, which we ran separately on each day, we assessed their tolerance towards their other dog partner. So we released both dogs at the same time, and they got to eat from a big food bowl filled with sausages. And following this, we sat down on the floor inside of the test room, and we just looked how the dogs were reacting towards me, so the mean experimenter, but also towards the other dog and towards their owner. And what we found in the end was that dogs reacted to inequity aversion, so to being paid unequally. So if one dog received a sausage, the other one received nothing. The dog that received nothing stopped giving the paw and did not want to participate anymore. If both got the same reward, they were willingly giving the paw all the time. And if one dog got a better reward than the other one, so if, for example, one got a piece of sausage, the other one got a piece of dry food, the one that got the dry food, which was clearly not as good as the sausage, didn't care, but just continued giving the paw. So it was definitely that, the one that got nothing kind of compared the outcome towards the one that got something better, but not as sensitive as, for example, primates like capuchin monkeys, which clearly stop if they got something of a lower value compared to their partner. With dogs, it was just, I get something, so I continue, or I get nothing and I stop. And what we found afterwards was that they shared less food with their partner in this food tolerance test if they received no reward compared to when both of them received a reward, so it kind of affected also their food sharing behavior afterwards. And interestingly, we also found that they avoided the experimenter. If the experimenter treated them unequally, they were not as much in close contact to the experimenter afterwards compared to when they both received the same reward.
So kind of they have an equity aversion, but only in a binary way almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not so much if it's a continuous difference.
Yes.
So maybe that may be like the kind of first obvious question there is, why don't they, like with as you said, with other monkeys or with humans, obviously it's also a quantitative difference. Like if you just get more of the same than me, then I'll be very annoyed for the same work. Is it a perceptual problem that maybe dogs don't exactly why don't they have that? Are they so caught up in what they did get that they don't think about like what the other's getting, or how?
Yeah, so they definitely knew about these two different qualities. So prior to starting the test, we conducted some food preference tests in order to see whether they can discriminate those two food types. And all of the dogs passed this. So all of the dogs preferred sausage over dry food if we presented both at the same time. So we kind of made sure that they had this preference for the sausage. So this could not be the problem, or this could not explain why they didn't care. The other thing is that we think that one problem might be that they're just so happy to take anything that they get from the human that they do not care what they are getting. So you often see this with dogs, that you give them some food and they do not even sniff your hand before taking the food, but they immediately eat it, right? Yeah. So it might be some kind of trust in a way that, I'm getting something and I'm happy with it. And especially in this context, which the dogs knew there, they came into this lab that we had there. They were all really excited because something cool was happening and there was food around. And so it might be that this general, motivation was so enhanced that they just were happy to get whatever they could.
Yeah. But like one about the perceptual question I had is like, so you have in your figure 1, I'm assuming you're sitting there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's an experimenter sitting there, but you can only see like arm and some legs, like not the face or anything. I mean, so what you're demonstrating there is the giving the paw task. But I'm assuming then you take the food and then give it over to the other animal, right? To the animal that gave the paw. I'm just wondering, does the other dog that's sitting there, in this case, looking very intently at the food, but does that how much does that dog realize what you took out of it? Like what you gave the other dog? That's kind of my part of the question. Like, do they even realize that they got less than the other dog, or what the other dog even got?
That's the issue. We don't know. So we try to make it really obvious. So we lifted the piece of food from the bowl, held it up in between the dogs so that they potentially could see and smell it, and only then gave it to the other dog. We also tried to make sure that to facilitate this movement of the food, and that we had this red food bowl, which is also present in the picture, and we had like a barrier somewhere there, like a cardboard barrier inside of the bowl that clearly separated the two food types. So we always had the dry food in the front and the sausage in the back, and this was all that we could do. Okay.
I mean, if you held it up between them, that should be enough. Seems like it. So I have a lot of, as I mentioned before we started recording, quite a lot of few technical questions, but I hope that also by doing that, maybe we can also explore kind of the more general concepts, maybe. We'll see. Or they're just boring technical questions, I don't know. But for example, in figure 1, you have this wooden log kind of barrier. No, it's not really a barrier, it's just 10 centimeters high or something, right? But between the dogs, why is that there?
So first of all, I tried to replicate the exact study from my supervisor, from Friederike Range there. And she also put the barrier there because she piloted this a bit and tried that, or found out that having this barrier there prevented the dogs from going to the other side. So even though they could easily walk over it, it was kind of a physical barrier to them because we didn't want the dogs to just go to the other side. Okay. So they were both on a leash anyway, but still if they wanted to, they could slightly go to the other side. So it was kind of a physical barrier in a way.
Okay. Now, a few questions about the dogs that took part. Actually, first is a comment. So when you do studies about humans, anonymity is one of the things that you have to be very careful about. But in your case, you provide for each dog the breed, the age, the sex, and the name. And I will make a bet that there aren't many 7.9-year-old Bardino mixes called Socrates in Vienna. So I think you're not maintaining anonymity of your participants here, are you?
No. No, but I think also just coming from the other way around, I think it's important, for me it's important to name those individuals that participated because they're individuals, they're not test subjects or whatever. So I intentionally like to give them individual names or use their actual names because they're individuals. They're not like test subjects that I just took out of a random sample. And I took them out of a random sample, but they're not numbers to me or anything. They're individuals with names, with a particular history.
Some interesting names in there. I wonder who called their dog Gatsby. I hope it's a computational neuroscientist who's alluding to the Gatsby computational neuroscience center at UCL.
Obviously, yeah.
Or not. But yeah, I mean, there's some interesting name. Ultimo, Pippi Lotta. It's a very creative name. Anyway, but I actually had like some more serious questions about this, which is, so the first thing is, so this is slightly, you said it's a random sample, but in some sense it's also quite limited, it seems to, not limited, but I mean, limited in the sense of it's not perfectly random, because at first you're limiting it to dogs that live together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did I understand it correctly?
Yeah.
And secondly, and I don't know whether this is a coincidence or how exactly you recruit the dogs, but most of the dogs are from a few species. So you have 34 dogs in total.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, I wrote this down. You have 11 border collies, 5 Australian shepherds, 3 Bernese mountain dogs, which means roughly 2/3 of your entire dogs are from those 3 breeds.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, can any dog take part in this, or why do we have such a limited or skewed sample of breeds in here?
Yeah, so we recruited those dogs in the Clever Dog Lab in Vienna by contacting owners that were registered in this database. And we have the problem there that it's often dog owners who have very active dogs, or who think that their dogs need to do some mental work in order to be happy. And often you find those working dog breeds like border collies, Australian shepherds, that Huskies. Are really Huskies not too much, but really these ones that are cooperatively working with humans, that are really active and that like to do those brainy games. And also you have owners, or most often you have owners that own these dogs that are also really active and that want to do something with their dog. So we for example, we rarely have had some owners there who have like Chihuahuas or those like toy breeds, which you just go out for a walk 5 minutes a day and the rest of the day they're inside of the home. And you think like, they don't need that much exercise or whatever, which obviously most of the time is not the case, but it's also this kind of perception of the owner about what their dog should do. And so, it's always a bit biased in the way that you have those more active breeds participating more often. But this was kind of regarding the sample size. We tried to follow up on this question as well in another paper which came out last year, in which we directly tested whether those cooperative breeds that work with humans, like herding dogs or herding dogs, perform differently in this inequity task compared to the more independent breeds, like Huskies, for example, which kind of work on their own. They do not rely that much on the human. And so we found that they do not differ in terms of inequity aversion, but both show it equally. But it's a good point. So it's always a bit biased in a way that you have particular breeds overrepresented and others not. And one other thing for one other inclusion criteria for the study was that they needed to give the paw on command. And not all dogs could do that reliably. So we had like a precondition in which we asked them to give the paw like at least 10 times in a row. And there you already had some dogs which were like, okay, I do it 3 times. And then like, why? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I gave it to you 3 times already. So why should I continue? So they need to be a bit, they need to be food motivated to a certain extent, and also, be happy to repeat the same action over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, like there's 2 things kind of that I thought about with the restrictions to the, the kind of restrictions you have in terms of the breeds of the dogs that take part. The first is kind of a funny analogy that, in psychology, we have this problem that, all the samples are weird. This which is an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, I think. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that the dogs are kind of a bit similar in that way, that, you only have the dogs that reliably, that are trained almost to give they have to be trained to give the paw, right? It's not like a natural behavior. Yeah. I think border collies are also used quite a lot because they're quite smart, right? Mm-hmm. And it just seemed to me like you almost have a slightly similar sampling problem there. Yeah. But the other thing is that, and this I guess it's maybe not a problem for this study per se, but maybe for these kind of studies, is that You also said at some point, let's give me a second. You said you also exclude, or you don't use dogs that have food aggression. Mm-hmm. And as you said, like they have to give the pause several times. So, you're sampling for very friendly dogs, right? Mm-hmm. By doing that. So if you're studying cooperation, isn't that a slight problem? Again, here you're doing inequity, which is maybe a bit different, but...
Obviously it could be, yes. But especially with these tests that involve close interaction between two dogs, but also with the human, you kind of need to have this safety net in order that you're sure like the dog won't bite you because you're not giving it a piece of food. So it's also kind of a safety thing to include only pretty well-trained animals that are happy to interact with humans, because in the end it should also be like fun for the dogs in a way to participate. And if a dog has some human aggression or is slightly stressed in all those situations, they wouldn't be behaving normally, and it would reduce their welfare, and we don't want that. So,
is that why you also chose dogs from the same household?
Yes, but also, one thing for sure, that they do not show aggression towards each other. They can be in close proximity if food is involved, but also because they know each other, and with inequity aversion or also cooperation in general, you have it that closely affiliated partners that know each other very well, that they are more prone to cooperate with one another compared to with a stranger. So you obviously also like to work together with a friend compared to a complete stranger. So this is also kind of, increasing the chances of detecting this behavior in this regard.
Yeah, I was about to say, doesn't that then increase like if you have dogs living together, unless like the owners have a clear favorite, you'd assume that they also kind of grew up with equity, right? Mm-hmm. So, is the statement then more that not necessarily that dogs naturally have an equity aversion, but more that they can have it? Is that then under certain circles, some kinds of dogs have it? Because again, I'm just, you see what I mean? Like wondering, like if you, and of course that makes it very difficult to study, but if you have just all kinds of dogs that don't know each other, different breeds, whatever, whether they'd still show it.
I think it's not a learned behavior, but it's like a cognitive ability. So it doesn't really depend on what you've experienced previously. Obviously, if you experience extreme inequality, then you're more sensitive towards it. But I think it's just like a general, or as the theoretical principle behind says, that it's a way to stabilize cooperation, so that you have those cheaters that always take out everything, that they're eliminated in the long term or in the evolutionary sense. So I think it's something that is just inherited in a way, like a cognitive ability that balances cooperation, but that's not necessarily learned. So in a way that we could show that dogs are somehow sensitive towards this, whether it's really like similar to our sense of fairness, that's where we cannot answer, but we show they are sensitive towards it, so potentially it's present in all dogs, independent of what they experienced before.
Yeah, I also don't know. So the dogs we had were, I think by coincidence, both male and pretty large. So, it would be like when you'd walk the dog, again, a fairly rural area, you'd always come across other dogs when you'd walk them. And two male dogs is always a bit annoying. In our case, the dog was usually quite a bit larger, so he just didn't care about the other dogs barking at him. Mm-hmm. But then you'd have those like 4 dogs that were all kind of the same size. Yeah, obviously, if you can't do the study with those 2 in the same room because they're going to fight for dominance first.
Exactly, yeah, that's kind of a problem, I think, with all animal studies, that you kind of need to make sure that they're in a comfortable position so that they can show their cognitive abilities. Because if you put like a dog there with a stranger dog, and they first of all would sniff each other, would maybe, fight or try to be close or to play or whatever, so they would be distracted from the actual task that you want them to focus on.
Yeah, well, I could imagine like if they just had a fight for dominance, one might be very stressed on something and barely even pay attention to anything that's going on. Yeah. I guess whatever species or whatever you test, you always have these very specific problems to the populations. Mm-hmm. In humans, you sometimes you do a study and they say afterwards I tried to see whether I could mess with your data. It's okay, thank you. Or like, I tried to see whether I could do the task without thinking about it. It's like, yeah, we kind of wanted you to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we don't have these problems.
Exactly, you don't have those, but then you just have completely different problems. Yeah. Yeah. One question I had about the dogs, but which is the same for the parrot study. Why does a human give out the rewards? So in this case, it's always you have a human experimenter who gives, in all cases, food out to the animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why put a human in there? Wouldn't it make more sense to have it like as like an automatic machine or something that gives out food if certain conditions are met? I mean, you could of course have it like human press the buttons, find a one-way mirror or whatever. But yeah, like why doesn't that just make? Yeah, then it's a study of like dog behavior or parrot behavior in the presence of humans who they know expect certain things, and yeah. Yeah.
So just first starting with the dog. So I think in human psychology it was established that inequity aversion only is valid if you have like a third party that is distributing things unequally. And this third party should be a human who does this somehow intentionally. So there was a study looking at it, whether humans also show an equity aversion if they're interacting with a computer. And there they did not show that strong inequity aversion because it was this computer doing it randomly and without kind of the intention of treating people unequally.
What's that paper? Do you know? Or like what I searched for? Or okay.
No, I think I mentioned it in another paper in which we exactly looked at this, because we were also wondering with the dogs whether they would also show an equity aversion if it's just like still a human giving the food, but from behind a barrier so that they could not see it. And with the dogs, for example, in the study with a barrier, they did not show, or it wasn't that clear that they show an equity aversion in this other paradigm, but there we couldn't say for sure that it was the presence of the human, or rather this different paradigm that we used, that was causing this lack of inequity aversion. So with the dogs, asking them to give the paw and have this more natural interaction, we deliberately used the human experimenter there asking for it and giving out the food intentionally in this unequal way. For the parrots, it was actually a bit different. There I think it would have worked with an automated machine giving them the food, but there was just more naturally to perform this action like that, so that you have the human pushing in the tokens and giving out the food, because they were trained from previous studies that there's this human on the other side who they can interact with and who gives them food. But with the parrots, it was a bit more, or a bit less interactive, in a way that we were just sitting there silently giving out the food as we received a token, and this was it. With the dogs, it was intentionally more interactive, asking for the paw and giving the food.
Yeah, especially with the dogs, I think my question is less. Yeah, it was maybe, let's say, more about the parrots per se, because, I mean, first of all, I guess dogs, we domesticated them, so humans are a much larger part of their life anyway. Mm-hmm. And because you're giving the paw, you already have this interaction anyway, so that makes perfect sense. But with parrots, I was just wondering, we're talking earlier about like the ethology of different animals and their kind of natural behavior. Now you're creating a situation where you have this godlike figure that can give out food to the parrots, which I'm assuming doesn't exactly happen in the wild. Yeah. So does this actually say anything about, does it say something about their natural behavior if this is a situation they'd never encounter? Or...
I think yes, because it's still, so we looked at this, propensity to help another. So it was more about whether this parrot on the other side understands the action-based goal of its partner. So do they understand that the partner wants to exchange the token for food? So it wasn't necessarily this direct interaction with a human that we were looking for, but rather how they interact between each other for reaching this one goal, which kind of involved the human. And there we also tried to, look at the effect of the human on the other side by implementing a control condition, which the human left the room so that they were still able to interact with one another, but not with a human. But I think this is often a problem with all these cognitive studies, that you have the human part there, because obviously we need to manipulate something, or to give food, or to put an apparatus somewhere. So I think this will only get better sorted out in the coming years, in which we have so many more automated options like drones or like computer touch screens or robots, which could do the same actually, and maybe even in a better and standardized way.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I guess it also depends on what your question is, right? Like you can have, if your question is, are they cognitively capable of this thing? Then it doesn't matter, right? And in a sense, you could just say like, well, we want to find out whether they can even have these kind of beliefs about another parrot score or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the answer is clearly yes.
Yes.
And even if the circumstances are slightly artificial, yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe it says maybe slightly less about inequity, aversion in parrots in their kind of everyday lives, but it says something about their cognitive capabilities.
Exactly, yes. And this is always the starting point, right? We need to find out if they do it in an experimental setting, which obviously often is quite artificial. And from then on, we can look at the more natural setting to see if they do it there as well and how it looks like without these artificial tokens or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, talking about like a more natural thing, have you heard of, I watched a documentary or something about, in Japan, they have this chimpanzee lab where they have this like very natural environment, and where like at the top of one of these trees or whatever, they installed like this thing where the chimpanzees can just go and do a task and then they get food for it. So like they don't interact with humans at all. Mm-hmm. Maybe they teach them like the task in a different way, but yeah, I mean, when I saw that, I thought like that really seems like they've really tried to like, they said make it as natural as they can. Like the chimpanzees would have to go to a tree to get food or something. In this case, they go to a tree and they like, in this case, apparently chimpanzees have this amazing visual memory, like so much better than humans. So they're just like on this touch screen all the time. Mm-hmm. But it also seems like you need a lot of money and funding to have that kind of huge space. And
Yes, but it's awesome that they can just have so much control over their environment and what they want to do when.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess with dogs we could probably get fairly close, right? Because dogs live with humans anyway, so that's not a problem. And
exactly. But still, this also raises some problems, especially with dog research, because they're so sensitive towards us and our behaviors, where we look, how we interact, or how we move our hand, or how we orientate our body or our shoulders towards particular things, or even how our mood is, that we can easily bias the results just by having an experimenter inside of the same test room or whatever. So we need to be very careful in this sense to act really passively.
How do you do that when you know exactly that every dog prefers the sausage? It was for all dogs the high value reward or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So you know exactly what's happening, right? You know exactly what the dogs should prefer, how they should act, you have expectations. Mm-hmm. How do you? I mean, can you even be neutral there, or how did you tackle that problem?
So you try to be as neutral as possible. I don't think it will be possible 100% because you always have this unconscious bias maybe in a way. But what we always try is to wear, for example, sunglasses so that they cannot see our eyes or where we're looking at, because this could already bias their choices. And then to have, we have really specific marks on the floor where we put the food. We have a random sequence, for example, to say okay, it's never on the same side or whatever. And we have this really standardized way of moving around during the test so that we do not, scratch the head or whatever. You try to avoid this. Obviously, you cannot always do this, but you try to standardize your movements and always use, for example, the same person who's conducting the test so that it's not like a stranger on the one day and then the same or the person that they knew on the other day. So you try to be as persistent as possible.
And we could call it a null results that you have, in the way that you don't have this, what did you call it? This kind of quantitative, sorry, what did you call the condition again?
Quality
inequity. Reward inequity, right? That was the one where you didn't have the difference. Yeah. In a way, the fact that you didn't have any effects there probably shows that you as an experimenter didn't have too much of an effect, because for humans, we would expect that dogs would behave differently if you give them that. So maybe in a way, actually, that actually maybe points to there not being too much bias in the study.
Yeah. And what we also try is that they do not know us from before. So it's always just in this setting. Maybe it might be, or it might look very different if, for example, the owner would have done the test. So they might have reacted much more strongly because they have these expectations or they have higher expectations in their owner or experiences with their owner compared to a stranger.
Oh, sorry, I actually meant quality inequity, not reward inequity. What I just said. Sorry, yeah, because sorry, that's what I meant, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, last question is, it seemed to me like there were quite a lot of trials for dog. Do they continue? I don't know. It's I can't remember exactly how many trials there were, but I went through it and thought do they just get not bored after a while, or do they continue? I mean, is it just food? They'll do it. Did you ask the owners not to feed them before they came, or?
No, they were not food restricted in any way, but so we give them sausage or dry food, which they usually don't get during their normal day. Also, the dry food that we used there was something that I think all of the dogs did not get at home, so it wasn't their daily usual dry food. And this also comes back to a question before of this selection bias, in a way that we have all those border collies, which they were just happy to give their paw 30 times in a row, and did not get bored by it because they got nice sausages.
Good old border collies.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do without them? You would have had to test so many more dogs that then just stop at some point.
Yeah, they're really nice to work with because they have this motivation to continue to work, to please in a way.
Yeah, that's the same as with humans. It's always nice to have motivated participants who actually listen to read the instructions carefully, sit there for an hour doing the task. But yeah, I wanted to move to the parrot stuff. A very general question. How did it feel to get so much media attention? So it seems that, so every single person I've interviewed so far I read their paper because I came across it in my work, and then, contacted them. But in your case, actually, I was, this is the first study where I was once again wasting time on Reddit. And then on the front page, it said this thing. And I thought, this is perfect. This is cooperation in animals. I've wanted to have a guest, where I can talk about these topics. And then I read the study. So yours is actually the only one where I saw a kind of public press release and that kind of stuff before I actually read the paper. And then I looked whether you had Twitter, which I don't think you have.
No.
And I just saw all these, the first page is just newspaper articles reporting on the study.
It was great.
And now you're talking to me. But although I don't really consider this journalism. But yeah, so I'm assuming that didn't happen for all of your studies.
No, not at all. No, it was really crazy and also interesting to see how it works if you publish a paper and how the journal handles it and kind of distributes it to the journalists. And it was really a stressful week before it was published because I had to talk to so many journalists, and I have to say I was always really scared in a way that I said something stupid that they would use then to write up their article. Many journalists sent their article to me before they published it, which was really nice, or checked back and said okay, I wrote like this is fine. And it was really interesting and nice to see how your work kind of gets public attention in a way. I mean, not all headlines or whatever were correct, scientifically correct in a way. So I often thought that's not correct. That's not how I said it, or what we showed actually. But it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this hierarchy of hype and accuracy, right? You have the actual paper. So first you have what the scientists think, then you have the paper, then you have the press report from the university, and then you have the newspaper articles. Yeah. And at each step it gets more extreme and less correct. What's in it?
That's true.
But you said before it was published, it sounds like you said the journal instigated this. What they contacted some organizations and said hey, we've got something. We finally got something that people might be interested in.
No, I think it works a bit differently. I didn't get into it 100%, but I think it's something all those science journalists, they're kind of, following some newsletter or whatever, which says like, we have these studies coming out, and do you want to report about it with I think the abstract just in it, so that they can decide which study might be interesting for them. But obviously all the journals pre-select some studies which they think might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, some stuff's going to be so technical that, I mean, this is in a way, also the perfect study for a kind of it has a broad appeal, right? You have firstly a fairly straightforward message that people can understand you don't need jargon to understand this. And secondly, you have a cute video of parrots giving each other tokens.
Yes. It was a really, really nice study and nice to communicate with the press.
Do you now, for all the papers that come out since, do you always hope like maybe this one's also going to get this much attention and then it doesn't? No, I don't. Okay.
No, that was really exceptional because it just worked out so nicely and the results were so clear. I mean, often most of the time, this is unfortunately not the case.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's also just very cool to see the video. I mean, like the video on Twitter by a new scientist that they posted I think today it had 13,000 views or something,
wow.
Which is, and that's just like the thing that they put on Twitter, not what's on their website or on other things, right? It's a lot of people. Those are famous parrots. But yeah. Anyway, it's fun. Yeah. We'll see how often that happens that I contact people because of something I found on Reddit. I don't think it's going to happen often, in part because I want to stop wasting my life there. And also because, usually it just goes the other route. But again, do you want to maybe this paper that we've been talking about now for 5 minutes without actually saying what you did and what you found? Again, do you want to maybe summarize it in a few minutes so we can have that as a starting point?
Yes, sure. So in this study, we tested actually 2 species of parrots. So it wasn't only the African greys, which were like all over the press, but actually we tested also the blue-headed macaws, which are smaller sized macaws, which are endangered in the wild, but we had them there in this research station, and they are actually quite nice comparison to look into, these helping behaviors or pro-social behavior, because they show differences in their social organization and also in their social tolerance, which is interesting for these results. And so we tested those 2 species in an instrumental helping paradigm in which we trained them beforehand to exchange small metal tokens for pieces of walnut. The parrots already knew how to do this from previous studies, so we just refreshed their memory and then tested them with their partner in an indoor test compartment in which we had a plexiglass barrier separating the 2 birds. And we confronted them with the situation that one bird had these metal tokens, but could not exchange them with the experimenter because the exchange hole towards the front was blocked. The other bird on the other side had no tokens, but had an open exchange hole, so could potentially exchange something for food, but obviously lacked the tokens for doing so. And so we just, observed what they would do in this situation. And surprisingly, we found that this actor bird, which had all the tokens, gave 1 token after the other towards the receiver bird, who then exchanged it with the experimenter for food. Well, obviously, this could just be some kind of play behavior or whatever. So we tested them in a social control condition in which there was no experimenter present, no food present, but the tokens were inside of this compartment anyway. So we wanted to see if they also exchange tokens in this setting in which they cannot exchange it for food. What we found was that they did not exchange tokens in the social control. And likewise, they also did not exchange tokens if there was no partner on the other side who could receive those tokens. In between of those test and control conditions, we implemented some motivational controls in which, one bird had the tokens and could also exchange the tokens for food in order to make sure that they were still motivated to do this action. And as I said, with the African grey parrots, we found that they exchanged lots of tokens in the test condition, but not in the control conditions. The blue-headed macaws, on the contrary, were not helping each other. So they transferred rarely any tokens, and they did not discriminate between the control conditions. So in the social control, in which there was the partner also on the other side, but no food available, they exchanged no tokens at all. But in the non-social control, in which there was no partner on the other side, they still exchanged, or they still brought their tokens towards the other compartment, which led us believe that they were just trying to bring the token as closely as possible to the human hand, so that they could, or with the hope that maybe they could also get some food in the long term. And following this test, we always we opened a curtain in between these compartments to see how the birds would interact after the test conditions. So we looked at the proximity towards each other, but also whether they would allofeed. And then we repeated those tests again with another partner. So we tested them once with a highly affiliated partner and once with a non-affiliated partner, always from the same social group. And what we found was that they exchanged more tokens. So now only speaking for the African greys, because the blue-headed macaws did not help another. So the African greys exchanged more tokens with their partners that were highly affiliated and less with their less affiliated partners. But still, they exchanged tokens with all partners. And what we also found was in this interaction afterwards, they spent more time closely towards their partner if they exchanged lots of tokens. And something that I forgot to explain in the description of the test was that we reversed those roles always after one test trial. So that the bird that could exchange tokens before was now the one that could only give tokens to the partner. And so what we found was that if this first actor exchanged transferred lots of tokens towards the receiver bird, that then the receiver bird, once the roles were reversed, also gave back lots of tokens. So it was kind of a form of reciprocity, which, unfortunately with this data, we cannot say for sure if this is really reciprocity or if they're just kind of in a happy mood once they received something like that. But still these results show that on the one hand, parrots, so a non-mammalian species, is able to help another, and also that potentially some form of social tolerance or social organization explains species differences. While the African greys, they live in really huge flocks of 1,000 individuals, and they show this fission-fusion dynamics, which means that they roost together during the night in a tree, and during the day they separate again in small groups for foraging, but then they always come back together during the night. So it might be for these African greys, which live in these huge flocks, it might be a way to build up something like a good reputation. So they help another, so maybe it's a way of showing or signaling that they're a good cooperative partner. So it might be important for them to build up this reputation. And the blue-headed macaws, on the contrary, so while they're very endangered in the wild, there are still some studies on their social organization, and they have been found in much smaller flocks, so only up to 10 individuals, and they do not mix with other flocks or anything. So they're always in this constant composition. So it might be that for them it's less important to build up a good reputation or anything, because they're always together with the same set of individuals. And this social life is maybe more structured by dominance or whatever. And another thing that we found between the two species was that the African greys were much more tolerant in the food context compared to the blue-headed macaws. So it might be that the African greys, they're just much more prone to share food compared to the blue-headed macaws. What does
food tolerant mean?
So in this regard, we did we called it food tolerance study, in which we presented a small bowl of food. So it was a bowl filled with seeds to two birds, and then just watched how they would feed from this bowl. So do they both put their head in and happily share with each other, or is one monopolizing the bowl and chasing away the other one? This is how we assess their food tolerance.
But it's not a tolerance towards the food, it's more tolerance towards sharing food with another or the other bird.
Yeah.
It's a very good summary. I think you seem to have practiced it through all the media stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see, where should we start? Maybe we can again start with a bit more of the more technical stuff, and then get to the more broader things. So in the video that I saw, and that I'll put in the description, so you always put your hand immediately underneath the hole where the parrot could exchange tokens for food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that suggest to the other parrot that they, it's expected? I mean, if they already know that they can exchange tokens for food, aren't you kind of suggesting that they should give over the token to the others because they want them to give some tokens?
Yeah, it could be, yes. But so from the training, they knew that there was this barrier in between so that they could not just walk to the hand. Still, it could somehow, this movement of holding the hand there could, elicit this, this trained response of grabbing the token.
What I thought, like, if you don't have your hand there, the parrot can still drop it and then you can still exchange it, right? Whereas I don't know how good parrots are at reading gestures, but like, especially like if as a human, like seeing the hand upwards, that's very much a give me something gesture. So yeah, that's just what I was thinking when I saw that.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it was this exchange behavior was trained like this with holding the hand open with the birds for other studies as well. So they were quite familiar already with this gesture in a way. And so that's why we used the same way of requesting the tokens. But in a way we controlled for this effect that this hand might facilitate the transfers with this non-social control condition in which we still held the hand in the hole, in front of the hole of the empty compartment. So there was no other bird there to take the token, but still the birds did not drop the token in the empty compartment, at least not the African greys. But they did not try to bring the token close to the hand in this condition. And we did it the same in all conditions, except for the social control in which we left the test room.
I have a more comment than a question. One thing that I was just thinking through kind of what the parrots are doing so they would, give the tokens to one condition, not the others and that kind of stuff. And it really does seem like they have to go through quite a lot cognitively, right? They have to realize like, oh, the other wants the token and can or can't give it and all these kind of things. Yeah, I think it's always funny, like when you have these tasks that are so natural to humans, to realize like it's quite a lot that actually goes into being able to make that kind of, to act in that kind of way. Yeah, I guess like the parrots and that kind of stuff are supposed to be very intelligent birds, right? But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but that comes again to the thing that we talked about in the beginning, that we humans always think of this as how the task should look like and how the animals are supposed to interact with all the items within this test room, let's say. But then again, in the end, it's like they have a completely different view of how it looks like, or that they try to get to the other side as well. So we needed to fix some things in the beginning so to prevent the birds from, trying to go through this exchange hole or rip open the curtain. So there's always a lot of piloting going in before you can actually test them. And especially parrots are very destructive. So you need to make everything parrot proof.
Actually, here's a question. You did do this, I'm assuming, but speculating. Do you think, so let's say you had a parrot proof method of only giving one parrot the tokens and the other couldn't get them, but there's no barrier in between them. Do you think the parrot would have given the other some tokens, or would they have just walked past them and given the tokens over themselves? Do you know what I mean? Like in the test condition, like you have, they have to basically like walk past the other parrot with a token in their mouth, in their beak, not mouth, and give it through the hole. Do you think they would have like shared some tokens there, or was it just because they couldn't do anything with them themselves?
That's a good question. So right now we are conducting a follow-up study to see if they not only share tokens but also food directly with one another, because the tokens, they're just like an intermediate step towards the food. So why shouldn't they share food with each other? And this is something we are currently looking into, whether they, for example, if you give them a bowl of food, do they just eat it up all on their own, or do they give something to their hungry partner as well? But this is not yet analyzed, but we're definitely trying to figure out what's happening there.
Yeah, for me, because it's also a question slightly about the boundary conditions here, because in a way, showing voluntary cooperation when this thing has no value to you because you can't do anything with it. It's a different kind of thing, right, than if you could actually do something with it yourself. Like if I have something that has no meaning to me, sure, you take it. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's a very different statement than something that I care about, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess, is this again then the kind of thing also to show cognitively whether they can do this kind of thing? Is it again?
Yeah. So again, this was the first study looking in birds, whether they would, provide this help to another partner in this instrumental paradigm. There was one study using the exact same methods in ravens, and they did not help another. So it's always good in this comparative setting to use the same methods to test another species to see how they perform comparatively. But it's difficult to design a task in which you have something of value to yourself, but then again, you have somebody else close by who could also use the same things. So the primate studies that looked into, or that used a very similar paradigm, they used 3 different sets of tokens. So one were self-serving tokens, which they could exchange with an experimenter and they got food themselves. Then they had tokens that were only of value to their partner, so they could not do anything with them, but give it only to the partner. And then they also had some no-value tokens, which, had no value. And obviously, if you do it like that, it gives you some more information about what's going on. So do they first exchange all of their self-value tokens, or do they first exchange all of their partner value tokens? But it also adds like an additional cognitive component, because they need to discriminate those tokens. They need to reach a certain learning criterion for performing the task. And so what we try always is to keep the paradigms as simple as possible, but again, allowing to draw some conclusion. And that's why we use this rather simple setup of just one set of tokens instead of 3 different sets of tokens. And also, blocking just the exchange hole and not having them walk past someone who also has tokens, for example, or who also could exchange them. But this is definitely something for follow-up studies to look into what's going on there.
Okay. So one you explained it briefly earlier, but if you can, it would be great if you could elaborate a bit on it. And this is this fission-fusion dynamics that the African greys show, right? Yeah. And can you just explain in a bit more detail what that is? Because I had never heard that before, and it seems kind of important for understanding the natural etiology of the animals.
So fission-fusion dynamics are social dynamics that you see across a range of different species, which basically just describe the way that they are organized, so that you have different subgroups within a bigger group that always merge together during certain times of the day or during certain weeks or whatever, and then split up again. And these kind of societies, which are in a way open and fluid, but still recognize each other potentially, are thought to produce individuals that are more cognitively advanced compared to societies which are just really stable and with a small number of individuals. Because if you have these fission-fusion dynamics, you kind of need to remember whom you've interacted with before, how this interaction turned out, or which individuals are good cooperators, for example, which ones are bad cooperators. And you do not see them like on a daily basis or on an hourly basis or whatever, but they disappear and then come back together. So it's thought to require more cognitive abilities compared to these really stable societies.
Sorry, if I'm understanding this correctly, humans live in fission-fusion dynamics? Or
yes, I think with humans it's always difficult to say, but I think
But it sounds like you have like your, let's say you live with your family and then you go to school and there's a different set of people, and then maybe you go somewhere else for football team or whatever. Like you have like these different contexts in which you different people. And is that an example of one of this fission-fusion dynamic, or is it different?
No, I think it's the same, that you have some people that you do not meet regularly, but then they come back into your life at some point. But I'm not sure if this was the natural condition for humans, because if you think of all those hunter-gatherers, they live in rather more like stable societies. They're not some strangers coming in from time to time, but it's rather always the same group of people. But I think like the modern societies definitely are.
Okay, so a city is, but evolutionary maybe not so much.
Could be.
Okay. I mean, you said like up to 1,000 per flock, right? Isn't Dunbar's number for humans 150? I don't know like how close human societies were to that number. If you already have like 130, 40 people, I guess you already have like these slightly But yeah, still everyone knows each other very well. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I should ask an anthropologist.
Exactly. I do not know.
Yeah. But so just so I understand the species a bit better and this dynamic. So should I imagine this like you have like a few birds that sleep in the same place, and then how do they nest? I'm assuming, or and how many
they roost. So roosting is just that the birds get together during the night because it's safer to stay together during the night in which predators are more active. And this getting together for sleeping is called roosting in birds.
And so how many birds is the entire flock together, or is it in just a few in groups, or how does?
No, the roosting is always like all individuals together. And for African greys, it was like the biggest flock recorded getting together during the night was like 1,000 individuals.
I see. And then a few of those, is it always the same kind of team that goes out for foraging during the day? Like, would you have like your teammates, your few people with whom you go, or is it always like a random selection
that's the
from
question.
the group?
I think we do not know yet.
Okay.
But I think you would expect that you always get out, at least with your mate and maybe some relatives or friends in a way. But I think for African greys, it has not been reported yet how this group composition changes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because for trust, this obviously has some implications, right? Like if it were that, let's say, I don't know, you have this flock of 500 birds and they always sleep in this one tree, let's say. And then at random, birds would go together. Obviously, for that, trust doesn't work. Or well, it's difficult to remember that many people, right? Or, I guess birds, not people. But it's also difficult to remember that many people. Yeah. But I guess you could still have like indirect trust where at least, but still, yeah. Okay, I guess if we don't
I don't think that they know like all 1,000 individuals within their flock, but at least they may be able to discriminate between, okay, this is one as a familiar individual that I've seen before, and this is an unfamiliar one coming out from another or coming to join us from another flock. Yeah. Just
find it so funny, like, because obviously to us they all look the same. At least from someone who hasn't actually interacted with them. So just imagine like 500 grey parrots, and you get like, which one? Yeah. To them, obviously, it's different.
Yeah.
And then one has a wider beak or greyer.
Yeah, but it's really those slight individual differences that you observe if you interact with them for a longer time. So them are a little bit more lighter on the head or more dark or have a scratch on the beak.
Okay. So you've worked on, dogs. Well, the stuff we discussed today was with dogs and parrots. Why did you work on those two species? Was it kind of there were positions available that worked with those animals? Did you specifically, I don't know, like, why dogs and parrots and now farm animals?
Yeah, so with the dogs, it was in particular that I wanted to do something with dogs because I had a dog at that time as well, and it was really interesting, easily available as well to work with. You don't need to go into the forest in Africa to study them, but they're already around you. And for me, it was always that I felt like I could read their behavior more easily because I was so familiar with them. That's why I started out working with dogs. And during my PhD, I realized that dogs are really interesting, but there's so much research in dogs and so little in other species that, for me, it was kind of like, no, I want to move on. Dogs are awesome. And I also got the chance to work with wolves as well in Austria. So there was really great experience and a great start. But then after the PhD, I wanted to use this knowledge and work with another species. And then, the first postdoc kind of came up by chance, so I didn't decide before to do something with parrots. But parrots are awesome. I mean, they're so intelligent. They often use them as models for a convergent evolution because they have these really big brains. They have this high neuron density. And of the research from I don't know if you know her, Irene Pepperberg, who did this first pioneer research with African greys showing how they can learn about concepts, how they can talk. It's really impressive. And so I heard about her before. And then, when I got the chance to work with African Grace, it was, really amazing to finally see how intelligent they are, and that I can use my knowledge from the PhD and the research topics in general and apply them to another species. And following that, following the work with the parrots, I kind of realized, okay, they're really interesting, but there's not really like an applied perspective in this way. So the research is super interesting and I'm really into it, but I want to kind of also change something or get a result out of it to have like an applied context. And it was always...
So there's more than just publishing papers to life.
Yes, definitely.
I didn't know. Okay. Oh God.
And which species are like treated the worst by humans? It's farm animals. And often you hear this comparison between dogs and pigs, that they are, but the pigs are even more intelligent than dogs. And if you compare the way we treat them, it's really crazy. And since there's not been so much done on farm animal cognition, this is something that I felt really close to, and my way to improve the world or to leave a little bit of my work for future generations.
Yeah. And so what did you were also in Zurich, right?
Yes.
What did you do there?
There I worked with roe deer. So again, switching species completely. Roe deer. The small deer that you find all over Europe.
Oh, it's a type of deer. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
I thought roe deer. I thought, what's a roe deer? Like as if that was like one word.
Two words.
Okay. It's a type of deer. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And this was also kind of by chance coming up, the opportunity. And this was a bit unrelated to my previous research, but again, I was able to acquire some new skills, like looking at the social dynamics within a group of captive roe deer and seeing how they adapt to captivity in general, which was really interesting, and going a bit more to in the area of behavior biology and pure observational work instead of this experimental work with parrots.
Is that published already? Or
no?
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. So I can't remember reading anything about deer. On your Google Scholar. So one, I guess we're nearing the end here at some point soon. But one kind of overall question I always have when I read studies about animals, studies about, let's say, evolutionary simulations of cooperation, is, does that actually tell us anything, and if so, what, about human cooperation? So is there anything that you learned about human cooperation from studying dogs, parrots, deer, animal farms, farm animals, not Animal Farm. Animal Farm, you can learn stuff about humans there too, but that's a different thing. But did you learn anything? Is there anything that you can kind of draw from your research to humans, or is it just? I don't mean just in a negative way, but it's limited to knowledge about the species.
So I think definitely about just scientifically speaking that there's this evolutionary origin, not just in humans, that we're able to cooperate with one another, but also in other primates, but not even primates, but also other mammals and birds are able to work together to achieve a common goal. And apart from this evolutionary background that we know that probably a common ancestor this how many million years ago already was able to do this, I think for me personally, it was also always really interesting to see that we humans are not as unique as we always think that we are. So especially with this helping behavior in parrots, it was always said like, we humans are so exceptional because we cooperate and we do something for strangers without expecting anything in return. But actually it's not that we humans are so special. We just did not look properly in the animals all around us. So this is something that I'm taking out as a message, that if we look properly, obviously we won't find talking parrots or whatever, which are super similar to us humans, but these really basic concepts of social life are also present in other species.
Yeah, and maybe in many contexts we don't understand the species well enough to really understand what they're doing. Or
exactly, yeah. This for sure is also like that we can't even see those really subtle signals that ants are exchanging between each other, following chemical signals or whatever. So we can't even see that.
So the fun thing is that you said, seeing, right? Because that's the primary perception modality that humans use. But of course, for many animals, they don't care too much about vision. So, yeah, it's really hard to escape that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm assuming for you it's maybe a bit easier because you've actually had to create experiments for animals. But, I mean, like, that's the whole... I haven't read it, but, this famous paper, like, what's it like to be a bat? As far as I can tell, that's something you can't really escape, right? I mean...
Yes. Yeah, we're just humans, so we see the world how we see it. And that's okay, I mean...
Yeah, but
as long as we are, like, tolerant of acknowledging that other species see it completely different.